Kendra Braxton didn't arrive with an entourage. She didn't step out of a sleek company car, or stride through the doors with a clipboard, an assistant, or a loud announcement of her title. No, she walked into Monarch Federal Speedway branch just like any other customer, wearing a navy blouse, gray slacks, holding a simple leather wallet in one hand, and car keys in the other. No one gave her a second glance, and that was exactly the point. The branch was quiet under the soft buzz of fluorescent lights. A few customers sat near the windows, scrolling on their phones, half listening to the occasional murmur of a transaction at the teller desks. Kendra waited patiently in line behind a man in a neon landscaping shirt, blending in perfectly, almost invisibly. When her turn came, she stepped forward with a polite smile. No fanfare, no name-dropping, just a simple, "Good morning. I'd like to make a withdrawal from my personal account." To the young teller behind the counter, Kendra was just another face, another task to complete before lunch. But Kendra wasn't there to make an impression. She was there to observe, to see firsthand how the bank treated customers when no one important was supposed to be watching. Because the truth about an institution, she believed, isn't revealed when executives visit in suits and ties. It shows up in the small, unguarded moments, in how everyday people are treated when they walk through the doors. Kendra didn't know yet how deep that truth would cut today. But the branch was about to find out exactly who she was, and what leadership really looks like when no one is performing for the cameras. Kendra hadn't even finished handing over her ID and account information when it happened. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him. A man in his early 50s, thin-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, maroon tie too tight against his throat, stepping quickly out from behind a glass-walled office. His smile was tight, almost rehearsed, as he cut across the lobby toward her, radiating the kind of authority that didn't ask, but assumed. Stephen Aldrich, the manager of the branch, without even glancing at the monitor in front of the teller, without asking a single question, Stephen positioned himself between Kendra and the counter. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't try to hide the condescension in his tone. "I'm sorry," Stephen said, his chuckle low and dismissive. "We can't process that withdrawal today." For a moment, Kendra blinked, caught off guard. There was no confusion in his voice, no hesitation, only a quiet certainty, as if her very presence, her clothes, her skin, her lack of a corporate badge, told him everything he needed to know. "I don't understand," she said carefully, keeping her voice level. "Is there an issue with my account?" Stephen gave a slight shrug, his mouth twisting into something almost resembling pity. "Let's just say," he smirked, "we've had some incidents, people pretending to be someone they're not. Large withdrawals. You know how it is." Kendra felt a coldness touch the base of her spine. She opened her mouth to respond, to offer additional verification, to suggest a simple system check. But Stephen was already leaning lazily against the counter, shaking his head as if her words were just noise. "No offense," he said, flashing an insincere smile, "but we don't just take people's word for it. And frankly," he tapped her ID card with 2 fingers, "this doesn't look like you." The lobby seemed to shrink. Kendra caught the nervous flick of the teller's eyes, the slight shifting of a customer behind her. Still, she stayed composed. "It is me," she said softly. "I'm Kendra Braxton." Something in her voice, calm but carrying an undeniable authority, made a few heads turn, but Stephen only snorted. "Ma'am," he said, waving a hand dismissively, "let's not waste each other's time. Come back with the proper verification. Or better yet, set an appointment." Kendra inhaled slowly. She studied him, really studied him, the way she might study a quarterly report that didn't add up. "Stephen," she said, reading the name off his badge with deliberate slowness. "Did you actually check the account in the system before you came over?" He straightened, crossing his arms in front of his chest. "It's procedure," he said briskly. "I don't need to look up every ID to know when something feels off." And there it was. Not policy. Not security. Just a feeling, a gut instinct, shaped by bias, cloaked in professionalism. Kendra felt a deep, familiar ache rise in her chest. She had led Monarch Federal through 2 brutal mergers. She had steered them through a recession. She had built one of the most respected financial institutions in the region, not from boardrooms, but from the ground, one hard-earned success at a time, and yet, here she was, being treated like a criminal in her own house. Stephen had already turned his back to walk away, satisfied he'd done his part, when Kendra quietly pulled out her phone and yelling and grandstanding, just a single call. The door to Stephen's office clicked shut behind him, but the air in the lobby didn't settle. It grew heavier, tighter, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Kendra didn't make the call yet. She waited, silent, still. Then, turning to the young teller, she asked gently, "Sherry, do you see the name on that ID?" Sherry, her hands trembling slightly, glanced down. "Yes, ma'am," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kendra Braxton. And when you type that name into the system," Kendra continued, each word deliberate, "what do you see?" Sherry hesitated, her fingers tapping across the keyboard, every stroke echoing in the unnatural silence. A beat. Another beat. Then her eyes widened. I see an executive account," she stammered. "Kendra Braxton, CEO." The realization swept through the lobby like a cold gust. Customers glanced up. The man in the neon shirt put his phone away. Even the security guard at the door shifted uneasily. And still, Stephen had no idea. He emerged moments later, a clipboard clutched under his arm like a shield. "Is there still an issue?" he asked sharply, eyes flicking from Sherry to Kendra, irritation tightening his mouth. Kendra didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. "Sherry pulled up the account," she said evenly. "It confirms who I am. You can process the withdrawal now." Stephen gave an exaggerated sigh, shaking his head as if Kendra were a petulant child refusing to leave a toy store. "Look, lady," he started, but Sherry interrupted, her voice shaking. "Miss Braxton, she's the CEO." Stephen froze for a moment, just a heartbeat. Confusion crossed his face, a crack in his certainty, before anger surged to replace it. "Oh," he snapped. "So now we're just taking customers' word for it? Letting them play dress up?" He turned on Kendra, his voice rising. "You show up here dressed like you're going grocery shopping, and we're supposed to roll out a red carpet because you say you're important." The words hung in the air, poisonous and heavy. Kendra met his gaze without blinking. "I didn't realize my wardrobe needed approval to access my own money," she said. Stephen scoffed, tossing his hands into the air in frustration. "It's not about your clothes," he barked. "It's about protocol." "No," Kendra said, her voice cutting clean through the room. "Protocol would have been checking my ID. Protocol would have been verifying my account. What you followed was assumption." Silence swallowed the lobby. You could have heard a pin drop. Stephen sputtered, looking around for backup, but found none. Not from Sherry. Not from Corey, the other teller who had risen from his desk. Not from the customers, now openly staring. And when Kendra finally pressed call on her phone, her hand steady, her voice calm, there wasn't a soul in the building who didn't feel the earthquake coming. They just didn't know yet how fast it would arrive. The phone barely rang twice before a voice answered. "Lorna," Kendra said quietly, her gaze never leaving Stephen. "Patch me through to HR." Immediately. "Yes, ma'am," came the efficient reply. She ended the call without another word, and then she waited, not pacing, not fidgeting, not speaking, just standing still, unmoving, like the eye of a storm that hadn't yet touched down. Stephen had already retreated into his glass office again. The door left ajar this time, arms folded, face pinched with annoyance, confident she was bluffing, confident that the woman standing there with no entourage, no tailored suit, no clipboard, could not possibly have the authority to change his day, much less his future. The lobby buzzed with unspoken tension. Sherry shifted uncomfortably behind the teller counter, glancing nervously between her monitor and Kendra. Corey, the young male teller, abandoned all pretense of working and simply watched. His brow furrowed at a few customers had stopped filling out forms altogether, pretending not to eavesdrop but hanging on to every syllable in the air. The minutes dragged at a slow, suffocating crawl. Kendra's phone buzzed against her palm. She answered immediately. "Kendra, it's Marlene," came the crisp voice of Human Resources. "I have Roland, the regional VP, on the line. We're en route." Kendra's lips curved into the slightest smile. "Good," she said. "I'm at the Speedway branch. I've just been refused service." The branch manager questioned my identity, ignored verification, dismissed me, publicly. A beat of silence. Then Marlene's voice returned, colder now, sharper. "He doesn't know who you are?" she asked. "I told him," Kendra said, her voice quiet but edged with steel. "Twice." Another pause. This one heavier. "We'll handle it," Marlene said. "Give us 3 minutes." Kendra hung up. She slipped her phone back into her purse without fanfare, no gloating, no satisfaction. Only an eerie, steady calm. She turned back to the young teller, Sherry, who looked like she wanted to vanish behind her terminal. "Miss Braxton," Sherry whispered, voice cracking under the weight of what she now understood. Do you still want to process the withdrawal?" Kendra's gaze softened. The girl wasn't the problem. She was caught in the middle of a system that taught her to doubt the wrong things and trust the wrong people. "No," Kendra said gently. "Thank you, though. You handled yourself the best you could." Sherry's eyes welled up slightly, a complicated mix of guilt and relief flashing across her face. I wasn't sure what to do," she stammered. "You trusted your system," Kendra said simply. "That's your job. What matters is how you respond when something feels wrong." Before Sherry could reply, Stephen reemerged, clipboard still clutched in his hand. Shoulders stiff, smile brittle, still pretending, still believing he was in control. "You still here?" he said, his voice slicing through the heavy silence. "Look, lady, you've made your point. You could have handled this properly. You could have called ahead. You could have warned you." Kendra finished for him, her voice like silk over steel. She tilted her head slightly. "I wasn't here to test your protocols, Stephen. I was here to see your instincts." He bristled. "You set me up." Kendra smiled, small and sad. "I didn't have to," she said. "You did it yourself." At that moment, the branch phone rang, sharp and shrill, cutting through the thick air like a siren. Everyone heard it. Corey answered with a shaky hand. "Monarch Federal Speedway branch," he said. "Yes." "One moment." He held the receiver out, eyes wide. "Stephen," Corey said. "It's for you." Stephen stared at the phone like it might explode. Then, slowly, stiffly, he walked over and took it. Stephen Aldrich speaking. The lobby was dead silent. Kendra watched him, watched the tiny muscles in his face shift, the stiffening of his shoulders, the subtle draining of color from his cheeks. "Yes," he said hoarsely. "She's still here." A pause, a nod. Another pause. Then, understanding, the moment it hit him, it hit hard that he hung up without another word. His hand trembling slightly as he replaced the receiver, he turned back to the lobby, looking around as if seeing it, and all the eyes fixed on him for the first time. "Miss Braxton," he said, trying to find the authority that had slipped from his grasp. "Can I speak with you privately in my office?" Kendra didn't move. "You had your moment?" she said quietly. Stephen faltered, clipboard sagging against his chest. He tried again. "Look," he said, his voice cracking. "Maybe things got a little tense. It's been a stressful morning, and—" "Stop," Kendra said. The words sliced through the room like a whip. The tellers froze. The customers froze. Even the security guard at the door straightened reflexively. Kendra's voice was still calm, still controlled, but it carried now that it filled every corner of the building, leaving no space for excuses. "I don't want a speech," she said. "I want accountability." Stephen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You're seriously blaming me for following security protocol?" he croaked. "No," Kendra said, stepping closer. "I'm holding you responsible for not following it." She counted off, each point landing like a hammer. You refused to check my ID. You ignored system verification. You dismissed me based on how I looked. You made it personal. Each word stripped another layer of bluster off him, leaving Stephen standing exposed and trembling under the fluorescent lights. And that's not just lazy, Kendra said, her voice dropping to a whisper now, dangerously soft. It's dangerous. Stephen swallowed hard that he looked small now, lost, and he had no idea. The reckoning had only just begun. The call had been made. The warning had been given. Now, the room was holding its breath, and no one said a word, and no one dared. Stephen stood in the middle of the lobby, clipboard still clutched like a life preserver, his mouth set in a hard line, but the confidence he wore earlier, that smug, dismissive certainty, was slipping, peeling away, layer by layer. Kendra stayed where she was, her stance relaxed, her gaze steady, her purse still hanging lightly from her arm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't take a single step toward him, and somehow, that made the waiting even worse. The employees shifted behind their counters, pretending to work, but their hands trembled on keyboards. The customers sat frozen in their chairs, deposit slips abandoned, pens dropped into laps. Even the security guard, posted at the door, kept casting quick, nervous glances between Kendra and Stephen. Everyone could feel it. Something was coming, something big. But no one could predict exactly how fast it would arrive. Kendra's phone vibrated once, a soft pulse against the side of her purse. She didn't reach for it immediately. She simply smiled, small, knowing, and then slowly pulled it out. One look at the screen was enough. She pressed answer, lifted it to her ear. Yes, she said softly. I'm still here. No, he doesn't know yet. I'll hold. The way she said it, so calm, so certain, sent a ripple through the room. The employees exchanged nervous glances. Corey, the young mail teller, shifted closer to Sherry, whispering something out of the corner of his mouth. Even Stephen, still stubbornly clinging to the illusion of authority, took a half step back. Something primal in him recognized the shift, recognized that whatever game he thought he was playing, he had already lost. The moments dragged. Then, the front doors swung open. The blast of sunlight framed two figures walking in, sharp and purposeful. Marlene, from HR, dressed in a dark navy suit, carrying a slim folder under one arm, and beside her, taller, broader, was Roland Pierce, the regional vice president. His expression unreadable behind sleek glasses, his stride unhurried but undeniably final. They didn't pause. They didn't look around. They came straight for Kendra, straight for the storm. Ms. Braxton, Roland said, nodding once in greeting. Thank you for coming so quickly, Kendra replied, her voice still calm, still low. Roland turned his gaze to Stephen then. A slow, surgical sweep, and something in Stephen visibly crumpled under it. Stephen, Roland said, his tone measured. We need to move to your office. Now. Stephen opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. But I didn't know she was coming. She gave no notice. Marlene cut him off with a single, sharp shake of her head. That's not the issue, Stephen. He turned helplessly, looking for backup. None came. Sherry ducked her head. Corey looked away. Even Dennis, the assistant manager, folded his arms across his chest and stared hard at the floor. You're being terminated, Marlene said, her voice clear and merciless. Effective immediately. Stephen's face went pale. You can't do this. I was following protocol. No, Marlene said crisply. You weren't. We've already reviewed the security footage. We have audio. We have visual. Her words hit like hammer blows. You refused to verify a customer's identity. You ignored system alerts. You showed blatant disrespect to a client. And, she added, her voice cutting like a blade, you created an unsafe, hostile atmosphere for your staff and your customers. Each accusation stripped away another layer of Stephen's defenses. In front of everyone, no private office, no quiet backroom deals, no whispered HR letters tucked neatly into folders. Here. Now. Where every pair of eyes could see the consequences, Stephen looked at Kendra then, desperation flashing in his eyes. I didn't know, he said, voice trembling. If I'd known who you were. Kendra didn't flinch. And that's the problem. she said, her voice low but carrying through the room like thunder. You would have treated me differently if you'd known I had power, if I'd walked in wearing a suit, if I'd brought an assistant, if I'd looked like someone you thought mattered. She let the words hang there. Heavy. Undeniable. But you didn't. Stephen's shoulders slumped. He looked around again. Pleading with eyes that found only silence, Marlene gently touched his elbow. Let's go. He didn't resist. The clipboard slipped from his fingers, landing on the tile floor with a hollow clatter, and he followed them numbly toward the back office, the door clicking shut behind them with a soft, definitive sound. The lobby stayed frozen for a long, trembling moment, and no one moved, and no one breathed. Kendra turned slowly, surveying the room. Her gaze wasn't angry at IT, wasn't triumphant at IT, was sad. Sad for the truth she had confirmed. Sad for the lesson it cost to teach at last. She spoke. I'll address the team in 5 minutes, she said, her voice soft. Please, finish assisting your customers. Then, without another word, she walked to the far side of the lobby. She sat in one of the padded chairs by the window, folding her hands loosely in her elapid alone, and no throne, and no applause, and no cameras. Just a woman who had come looking for the truth, and found it, raw and unvarnished, right where it hurt the most. The branch buzzed back to life slowly, like a machine restarting after a power surge. Whispers stirred. Footsteps softened. Eyes flicked toward her and quickly away again. But nothing would ever be the same. Not for the staff. Not for the customers. And certainly not for Monarch Federal. Because once you see the truth for what it really is, you can never unsee it again. The door to the back office clicked shut with a quiet finality. But the tension in the branch didn't disappear. IT thickened. The employees behind the counters barely dared to breathe. The customers shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, some pretending to look at their phones, others stealing glances at the woman in the navy blouse sitting calmly by the window, Kendra Braxton, the CEO, the woman they had treated or watched being treated, like an intruder in her own house. Outside, sunlight still spilled across the parking lot, ordinary and bright, as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis inside these glass doors. Inside, time felt like it was moving differently now. Slower, heavier. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Roland Pierce and Marlene from HR emerged, their faces composed but carrying the unmistakable gravity of people who had just delivered a death sentence. Roland's sharp gaze scanned the lobby, noting everything. The wide eyes, the frozen bodies, the awkward silence. Kendra rose from her seat as he approached. You okay? He asked under his breath, low enough that only she could hear. She nodded once, a small, tight gesture. I'm fine, she said. But the word hung there, not entirely true. Because fine wasn't how you felt after being judged by your own people at your own institution for the simple crime of blending in. Roland gave a subtle nod, understanding without needing it explained. That he turned toward the staff gathered behind their stations. Could I have the team's attention, please? The tellers hesitated, unsure whether it was safe to move. Then, slowly, they stepped out from behind their counters, gathering into a loose half-circle near the center of the lobby. Even Dennis, the assistant branch manager, abandoned his safe perch near the back office and drifted forward. His face pinched with uncertainty. Marlene stepped up beside Roland, her folder still tucked under her arm. Her voice was clear, but not unkind. I'm sure many of you are confused about what's happening today, she began. And I understand that this has been an unexpected and difficult morning. Her eyes swept the room, pausing just briefly on Sherry and Corey, who both looked ready to faint. But what happened here isn't just about one mistake, she continued. It's about a culture, about assumptions, about accountability. The words hit like steady blows, measured and controlled. And because of that, Marlene said, we needed to act. Immediately, publicly. No one spoke and no one moved. Kendra felt the eyes on her, dozens of them, and for a moment, she almost wished she could disappear into the floor. But she didn't. She stood taller instead. This, she said, stepping forward now, her voice even and strong, was never about embarrassing anyone. She looked at the tellers, at Dennis, at the few customers who were still pretending to fill out forms but were openly listening. It was about finding out, she continued. Whether what we say about this bank, about respect, about integrity, about trust, actually lives in these walls, even when no one's watching. Her gaze found Sherry's trembling hands, Corey's shifting feet, Dennis's averted eyes. And today, Kendra said softly, we learned the truth. The truth didn't come with fireworks, that IT didn't come with shouts or slamming doors, that IT came in the form of hesitation, of silence when speaking up would have mattered, of glances away when injustice unfolded right in front of them. And now, Kendra said, we do something about it. The words weren't angry. They weren't accusing. They were heavy, carrying the weight of disappointment. Yes, but also the faint, stubborn ember of hope. Roland stepped forward again. There will be a formal retraining, he said, on customer interaction, on bias, on protocols, on leadership. He didn't need to add the rest. Everyone understood. The branch had failed a test it didn't even know it was taking. Kendra looked around the room one more time. I'll be sitting in on the first session, she said, a small smile curling the edges of her mouth. And in the meantime, she paused. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because she wanted them to feel the next words settle deep into their bones. I want you to remember, she said, it's not about what someone looks like. It's not about what they're wearing. It's not about how loudly they announce themselves. It's about how you treat them, especially when you think they can't do anything for you. Silence. But this time, it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of understanding. The silence of people absorbing something they couldn't unhear, couldn't unsee. Kendra let the moment breathe. Then she gave a small nod to Marlene and Roland and turned toward the doors. Her heels clicked softly against the tile. No grand exit. No dramatic speeches. No victory lap. Just a quiet departure from a place that would never look at itself the same way again. As she reached the door, she paused, turned, and added one final, devastating truth. Leadership, she said, isn't how you behave when people are watching. It's how you behave when you think no one is. Then she pushed the door open and stepped into the sunlight, leaving behind a branch forever changed, and a lesson that would echo far beyond the glass walls of Monarch Federal. The branch didn't return to normal after Kendra left. IT couldn't. The energy lingering in the air was thick, heavy like a summer storm that hadn't fully broken yet. The employees moved slowly, mechanically, processing transactions, answering calls, assisting customers. But the weight of what they had witnessed, what they had been part of, clung to every breath, every glance, every silence, and no one said it aloud. But everyone felt it. Everything had changed behind the counters. Sherry wiped her palms on her skirt for the 5th time. Her heart still hammering, Corey kept typing and retyping the same set of numbers, realizing halfway through that he had entered them wrong again. Dennis, the assistant branch manager, paced the edge of the lobby like he was waiting for someone to tell him what to do. It was Dennis who finally broke the fragile silence. He cleared his throat, a rough, awkward sound that made everyone flinch. Team, he said, voice tight. Miss Braxton asked if we could gather for a quick discussion. He didn't have to ask twice. Within moments, the staff, Sherry, Corey, Leonard the senior teller, the 2 part-time clerks from the back, clustered in the middle of the branch. Even the security guard stepped closer, arms crossed, his posture stiff but attentive. They formed a loose circle, as if instinctively seeking comfort in proximity. Like soldiers after a battle they hadn't seen coming, Dennis shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the doors as if hoping Marlene or Roland would reappear to save him. But no one was coming. It was just them now. Left with the aftermath, the lessons, and the raw truth. Sherry was the first to speak, her voice a fragile whisper. I knew something was wrong, she said. The second she showed me her ID, I felt it, but I didn't know if I should say anything. Corey nodded, his own voice low and ashamed. Same, he admitted. I recognized her face. I remembered seeing her at that Phoenix conference. But when Steven stepped in, I froze. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't my place. Leonard, the older teller who usually kept to himself, pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. I've worked here long enough to know Steven's attitude, he said carefully. We all have. We just learned to stay out of his way. That admission hung in the air, heavy and bitter, because it wasn't just about today.it was about all the days before. All the quiet compromises, the small moments of silence, the times they had looked the other way because speaking up felt impossible. Dennis ran a hand through his thinning hair. I saw it too, he muttered. I thought maybe it's not my fight. Maybe it'll blow over. But now, he shook his head. It's not about fights, Sherry said, stronger this time. It's about what's right. They stood there, all of them, staring at one another, seeing each other differently for the first time. Not just as co-workers, but as witnesses, as participants, as people who had been given a chance to change. The security guard shifted his stance. I didn't know who she was, he said. Didn't matter. She was respectful, calm. She didn't deserve that. No one does. A hush fell again, heavier now, weighted by the understanding settling into their bones. It wasn't about Kendra's title. It wasn't about power or money or status. It was about dignity, about humanity, about the kind of place they wanted this branch to be. Not just when a CEO showed up unannounced, but every day, for every person. Dennis cleared his throat again, but this time when he spoke, his voice was steadier. New training's coming, he said. New policies, a new culture. But it's not just top-down. It's us too. All of us. He looked around the group, meeting every pair of eyes. If you see something wrong, you say something. If you see someone being treated unfairly, you act. No more silence. Heads nodded, real nods. Not the automatic kind people gave in meetings just to get it over with. Real agreement, real commitment. Because now, they had seen the cost of silence, and none of them wanted to pay that price again. For the first time that morning, a sliver of something broke through the tension. Not relief, not forgiveness, but hope. Sherry wiped a tear discreetly with the back of her hand. Corey exhaled, shoulders dropping a fraction. Leonard nodded once, firm and sure. Dennis smiled, small, worn, but real. We'll be better, he said quietly. Starting now. No one cheered and no one clapped. But somehow, the lobby felt lighter, as if a pressure valve had finally been released. And in that moment, standing together, facing their failures, promising something better, they became more than just a team. They became a chance, a second chance, one they would not waste. The lobby had mostly emptied by the time Kendra Braxton returned. She didn't make an entrance. She didn't call for attention. She simply walked to the center of the room, the same quiet strength in her step, and waited until the staff gathered around her once more. No clipboard, no prepared speech. Just truth, and a heart full of lessons. Today could have been just another Tuesday. Kendra began, her voice low, steady. A day you forget as soon as you go home. A day you barely remember next week. She paused, letting her words settle. But it won't be. She scanned their faces. Sherry's still pink eyes, Corey's newly squared shoulders, Dennis standing a little taller than before. Today mattered. The employees stood a little straighter, drawn in by something invisible but undeniable. Not because someone got fired, Kendra said, her tone gentle. Not because I wear a title, or because executives showed up with folders and sharp suits. She smiled, warm and human. It mattered because today revealed something we all need to see. Something uncomfortable, yes, but essential. The room stayed perfectly still. The truth is, Kendra continued, it's easy to be kind when someone looks important. Easy to be respectful when someone walks in wearing power like a second skin. But real integrity, she said, tapping her heart lightly, is how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. A few employees shifted, some nodding slowly, absorbing the weight of her words. You don't get to choose who deserves dignity, she said softly. You don't get to decide whose story matters based on what they wear, how they speak, or whether you recognize their face. You show respect, Kendra said, her voice rising slightly. Because that's who you are, not because of who they are. Silence, again. But this time, it was electric, alive with understanding. She took a slow breath, grounding herself. I came in today dressed like any other customer, she said, because I needed to know if our values lived beyond the posters on the walls. beyond the slogans on the brochures. And I saw the truth. Her gaze swept the room, warm but unwavering. I saw fear, I saw hesitation, I saw silence. But then, Kendra smiled. A real smile, worn and genuine. I saw courage. I saw reflection. I saw willingness to change. And that, she said, is where hope lives. The staff relaxed, their postures softening, their faces opening. You made mistakes today, Kendra said honestly. We all do. But the greatest mistake isn't falling short, she said. It's refusing to learn when life hands you the mirror. She let that hang for a heartbeat. And today, Kendra finished, you looked into that mirror, and you chose to be better. A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Heads nodded, shoulders squared. The storm had passed, but the lesson would stay. Kendra glanced once more around the lobby. At the windows letting in the golden afternoon light, at the worn floors, at the faces now so different than when she first stepped inside. This isn't just a branch, she said. It's a promise, a promise we make every single day, to treat people with dignity, with humanity, with grace. And if we do that, Kendra said, no matter who walks through these doors, we will be ready. The staff stood a little taller, a little prouder, not because someone demanded it, but because they chose it themselves. Kendra smiled once more. Thank you, she said quietly, for listening, for learning, for choosing to lead, even when it's hard. She stepped back, ready to leave them with the future they had just reclaimed. But before she turned away, she added, almost like a secret whisper just for them, leadership isn't a title, it's a choice you make, moment by moment, when no one's looking. With that, she offered a small nod and headed toward the exit. The doors swung open, letting in a warm breeze, carrying with it not just the end of a long, difficult morning, but the beginning of something new. Because sometimes, the biggest changes come not with shouts and banners, but with quiet decisions, with small shifts in hearts, with everyday moments where someone, somewhere, chooses respect over assumption, courage over fear. And if you believe in stories like this, stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us who we can be at our best, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we build something better, one truth at a time.